Okay, very quick reminder. Correlation. Correlation is the idea that when one thing goes up, the other goes up, or when one thing goes up, the other goes down. Might be when you study harder, you get better grades, might be, there are all sorts of different things. If you do not understand this idea of correlation, and when I say understand, I mean, can you explain it to someone else? If you don't understand it, if you can't explain it to someone else, go back and make sure that you learn it. There is absolutely no point watching a partial correlation video about correlation, partial correlations, if you don't understand correlation. Just turn it right off now, go back, work it out. This is absolutely foundational to understanding any stat stuff at all, so make sure that you understand correlation before you step onto this. So, partial correlation, not ridiculously complicated. Once you've got your head around it, it's not too bad. Now, if we think back to the previous video, we were looking at the idea that there's a relationship between coffee consumption, yes, I am drinking a cup of coffee, and stress. Okay, so what we found last time is that stress, as coffee consumption went up, stress went up. So there was a positive, remember we're talking about the correlation between being reasonably strong, so we're saying there's a positive correlation between these two. Now, based on the fact that because one goes up, the other goes up, we can't say that coffee consumption causes stress, neither can we say that stress causes coffee consumption, because we don't know. We only know that there's a relationship between the two, and that's really, really important. Really important to get your head around, really important to make sure that you understand so that you don't write something ridiculous in your essay. Correlation, not causation. Now, someone might come to me and they might say, look Brad, you're stressed, I think you need to reduce your coffee consumption because I think that your coffee consumption is the cause, which yes is a bit of a problem with correlation, I think that your coffee consumption is the cause of your stress. And I would come back to them and say, but, because I don't want to give up my coffee, but it might be something else. You might be right, there is this positive relationship between the two, however, it might be something else. And I would say, what about the fact that I tend to drink more coffee the closer I get to a deadline? So what I'm doing is I'm introducing a third variable. So let's say that we've got a deadline here, or days to deadline, okay? So we've got a deadline, and what I'm suggesting is that it's all well and good for you to say that coffee is causing my stress. However, what I'm suggesting is that I've noticed that there seems to be a relationship between my coffee consumption and a deadline. Okay? And then this other person would come back to me and say, but you're just confirming exactly what I've said, that the coffee is causing stress and you've got deadlines coming up and the coffee is making that kind of worse. And I would say no, because the deadline, the coffee consumption cannot change my deadline, right? So what I'm suggesting is that there is a relationship between both the deadline and stress and the deadline and coffee consumption. And that this relationship is explained by this variable. Okay, so the reason I can make suggestions, and this is exactly the same when you write your paper, about the direction is not based on the correlation, but based on the theory. Okay, so you're going to have a theory about attitudes, and that gives you the directional evidence that you need to kind of make your proposal. Now, what I'm suggesting is my theory for this is that the deadline is causing me to get more stressed and to drink more coffee. Okay, that it's not the coffee that's causing the stress, certainly not the coffee that's causing the deadline, but the deadline is causing me to drink more coffee and to stress more. Maybe coffee is procrastinating. Maybe it's got nothing to do with stress, that when I've got a deadline I want to procrastinate more, so I drink more coffee. And so what a partial correlation does is it says, okay, we've got these three variables, we're going to try and tease apart what's going on here. And so what we want to know is, does this relationship between stress and coffee consumption continue to exist after we've had a look at this? I cannot even begin to explain to you the maths, largely because I don't have a clue what they are. You don't need to understand them either unless you're going further through. But what SPSS will do when you do a partial correlation, which we're going to give you some instructions for in class, what SPSS will do is it will partial out, which is just a fancy way of saying put aside the correlation between deadline and stress and see whether this relationship between stress and coffee consumption is still there after you've already accounted for this. And then what I'll probably find is the relationship, the correlation that was there before partialing it out, the correlation that was there drops to nothing or drops to insignificance because it's all accounted for by deadline. Good luck.